OMG. Oh, wait, what? This from Gloria? Oh, what have I done to deserve this?
There is a type of person in this world that you do not fully understand until everything you have built is gone. Not a friend, not a family member, not a business partner or a colleague or anyone whose loyalty you have earned through blood or history or years of mutual investment. I am talking about someone you hired. Someone who cleaned your house and organized your kitchen and knew the specific way you liked your coffee and where you kept your extra keys. Someone you paid, and paid well, and sometimes paid a little more than that, because you believed in treating people right and it felt like the decent thing to do. I am talking about a woman named Gloria, and I am telling you right now, before we go anywhere else with this story, that on the worst day of my life, the day the banks called, the day the accounts were frozen, the day the house I had built my entire identity around, went silent in a way I had never heard it go silent before. Gloria did something that I did not see coming. Something that I still, if I am honest with you, have difficulty fully describing without my voice, doing something I am not entirely in control of. This is her story, and mine. And what happened when everything I thought I understood about loyalty, about money, about who people really are when the performance is over, turned out to be wrong in the best possible way. It is important that you understand what I had before I tell you what I lost. Not because I want your sympathy for a man who had a lot and lost it. The world is full of those stories, and most of them are not particularly interesting. But because you cannot understand what Gloria's loyalty meant without first understanding the size of the life she walked into when she started working for me, and the size of the silence that replaced it when that life fell apart. I need you to see both pictures, the before and the after. Only then will you understand why what she did hit me the way it did. My name is Robert Calloway. I am 51 years old now. At the time this story begins in earnest, I was 47 and living in a 6,000 square foot house in a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, with my wife Sandra, our two teenage sons, Marcus, who was 16, and Derek, who was 14, and a life that, from the outside, looked like the kind of thing people spend their whole lives working toward. I had built a mid-sized construction supply company from the ground up over a period of almost 20 years. I had started it in my late 20s with a used pickup truck, a small business loan I had spent 3 years convincing a banker in Marietta to give me, and the specific stubborn confidence of a man who has been told he cannot do something enough times that it has become the primary fuel source of his ambition. By the time I was in my mid-40s, Callaway Building Supply had 31 employees, 3 warehouses, and contracts with some of the most significant residential and commercial developers in the greater Atlanta metropolitan area. I did not come from money, I had made it. Sandra was a marketing consultant who worked part-time from home after Derek was born. She was organized in a way that I have never been, the kind of person who could manage 5 complex things simultaneously without dropping any of them, who had a system for everything and the patience to maintain those systems without anyone asking her to. In the spring of 2019, through a recommendation from a neighbor whose opinion I had always respected, Gloria Reyes came to work for us. Now let me tell you about Gloria. Gloria Reyes was 53 years old when she started working for our family. She had come to the United States from El Salvador in the early 1990s and had spent the intervening decades building a life in the Atlanta area through relentless work, through the specific dignity of showing up completely to every obligation she took on, and through a set of personal values that I would come to understand were not performed for anyone's benefit, but were simply the way she was built. She had 2 adult daughters, both of whom lived nearby. She was a member of her church, where she had helped organize the food pantry for nearly a decade. She was, I would come to learn over the years we worked together, one of those people who is entirely the same whether anyone is watching her or not. I paid Gloria well from the start, and beyond her regular salary, I gave her extra money from time to time. At Christmas always, at Thanksgiving. When one of her daughters had a medical expense one spring and Gloria mentioned it, not to ask for anything, just in passing, I gave her what she needed without being asked and told her not to worry about paying it back. For the first 2 years that Gloria worked for us, everything was good. The business was performing well. The housing market in Atlanta was strong, the construction industry was busy, and Callaway Building Supply was positioned in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. I had good people around me, an operations manager named Craig who had been with me for 11 years and knew the business nearly as well as I did, a sales team that had built real relationships with our contractor network, and a logistics setup that ran efficiently enough that I was able to think about growth rather than just survival. I want to tell you something about the years between 2019 and 2021, though, because there was something building during that time that I was not fully seeing, or perhaps more accurately, was choosing not to fully see. My business was heavily dependent on a small number of large contracts. I had 3 major accounts that together represented just over 60% of my annual revenue, 3 developers all operating in the same segment of the Atlanta residential market. That trust, as it turned out, was placed in the right people in the wrong conditions. Segment 4, when things began to turn, the year 2021 started well. We had come through the first wave of pandemic disruption in better shape than many of our competitors. But in the second half of 2021, interest rates began to move, slowly at first, then with the kind of velocity that the Federal Reserve had not employed in decades. The residential construction market in Atlanta began to cool. My 3 major developers all began to slow their purchasing. One of them, a company called Meridian Group that had been my single largest account for 7 years, began restructuring. By the beginning of 2023, 2 of my 3 major accounts had significantly reduced their volume with us. Meridian Group had, in October 2022, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. When Meridian went into bankruptcy, they owed Calloway Building Supply approximately $340, 0 in outstanding invoices, $340,000. I had built my company over 20 years. I had never had a single year where I lost $340,000, and this happened in the span of a filing. I did not tell Sandra the full extent of it immediately. I spent the first half of 2023 pursuing every option with everything I had. I did not find a way out. In 2023, according to U.S. courts data, business bankruptcy filings in the United States rose by more than 23% compared to the previous year. Commercial Chapter 11 filings rose by 77% in the first quarter of 2023 alone. Behind each one of those numbers is a Robert Calloway, a person who built something over years, who employed people, who made payroll and kept the lights on and believed in what they were doing, and who ran into a set of economic conditions that were larger and more powerful than their ability to respond to them. In the summer of 2023, after months of trying everything I knew how to try, I filed for Chapter 7 personal bankruptcy. The business was gone. The house, the 6,000-square-foot house in the Atlanta suburb where Marcus and Derek had grown up, where Sandra had built a garden in the back that she had spent 4 years getting right. The house went back to the bank. We had approximately 6 weeks to clear it out. Sandra and I had conversations during those 6 weeks that I would not know how to describe to you in polite detail, not because they were cruel, but because they were the kind of conversations that only happen when the life you built together is being taken apart piece by piece, and you are both watching it happen and trying to hold each other together at the same time. The boys knew. Marcus was 18 by then. He took it hard in the quiet way he took everything hard. Derek was 16 and oscillated between anger at me and desperate attempts to reassure me that it was going to be okay, which was the most heartbreaking thing I have ever experienced. My 16-year-old son trying to comfort his father. To tell you about the day I told Gloria. I had been dreading it for weeks. Not because I thought she would react badly. Gloria was not a person who reacted badly to things, or at least not in my experience of her. I dreaded it because telling her meant making it real in a way that it had not yet been fully real to me, and because she had been part of our household for 4 years by that point, and I had come to think of her as someone whose presence in my life I genuinely valued. It was a Thursday morning in August. Sandra had taken the boys to run errands. The house was mostly packed up at that point. Boxes in the hallways, furniture that was going to storage stacked in the garage, the visible bones of a life being systematically disassembled. Gloria had come in to help with the final cleaning of the rooms we had already cleared. I found her in the kitchen, cleaning out the pantry, and I asked her if she could sit down for a moment. I told her everything. I told her about the business, about Meridian, about the bankruptcy filing, about the house. I told her we would not be in a position to continue her employment. I told her that I had set aside money to pay her 3 months of severance, not because I was legally required to, and not because she had asked for anything, but because it was the right thing to do, and because it was the only concrete thing I had left to give. Gloria sat across from me at that kitchen table and did not say anything for a long moment. And then she said something that I was not prepared for. she said. Robert, I am not worried about me. I am worried about you and Sandra and those boys. What do you need? What happened over the following 3 weeks is the part of this story that I have turned over in my mind hundreds of times. The day after our conversation in the kitchen, Gloria came back to the house. She brought food. Not a small amount of food. Sandra told me later that when she came home that afternoon, there were 3 large containers of food in the refrigerator, the kind of serious home-cooked food that takes hours to prepare. There was a pot of arroz con pollo that could have fed 8 people. There was a Tupperware container of tamales that she had made herself. There was a covered dish of rice and black beans. There was a note on the counter in her handwriting that said, simply, "For the week. Don't worry about anything today." I stood in my half-empty kitchen and looked at that food, and I did not know what to do with what I was feeling. That food, sitting in my refrigerator, prepared by a woman who had just lost her job because of my failure, and whose first response to that loss had been to come back the next day and cook for my family, undid something in me that I had not known needed undoing. I sat down at the kitchen table, and I put my face in my hands, and I cried for the first time since any of this had started. She came to help pack on 2 of the Saturdays. She brought her daughter Angela with her on one of those Saturdays. On the day we left the house for the last time, Gloria was there. She had come on her own, without being asked, and she had brought flowers. Just a simple bunch of sunflowers from the grocery store. She gave them to Sandra, and she hugged her for a long time. And then she turned to me and she said, "You are going to be okay. You did everything right by people." That comes back. Now I need to tell you about the severance. About 3 months after we moved into the rental in Marietta, Sandra came to me one evening with an envelope. She sat down across from me at our small kitchen table and handed it to me and said, "This came for you." The envelope had no return address. Inside it was a card, the plain kind you buy at a drugstore, with a simple landscape on the front. Inside the card, in Gloria's handwriting, was a short note. It said, "Robert, I know things are still hard. I thought this might help. You gave more to me than you know." Folded inside the card was a check. It was for $1,500. It was drawn on Gloria's personal checking account. She had returned half of her severance. I sat at that table for a long time with that check in my hand. I have been in business for 20 years. I have written large checks and received large checks. I have never been moved by a sum of money the way I was moved by that $1,500. Not because of the amount, because of what it represented, because of the calculation she must have made. A 53-year-old woman who had just lost steady employment and who could not possibly have afforded to give back anything, who had nevertheless looked at what she had received and decided that the people who gave it to her needed it more than she did. I did not cash that check for 2 weeks. I kept it on the kitchen counter and looked at it every day. Finally, I called Gloria and told her I was not going to accept it. She told me she was not asking me if I wanted to accept it. She told me it was already done and that I should cash it and stop making a fuss. I cashed it. And I have never told that part of the story without the same thing happening to my voice that is probably happening to it right now. I want to talk about something that goes beyond my story and Gloria's. There are currently approximately 2.4 million domestic workers in this country. These workers are among the most economically vulnerable members of the American labor force. They often work without formal contracts. Many of them have built their economic stability on a foundation of informal relationships that depend entirely on the continued goodwill and financial health of the families they serve. The relationship between an employer and a housekeeper is not supposed to be a deep one. And yet Gloria had a loyalty that most people reserve for family and decades of shared history. She had it for a family she had worked for 4 years. What she had was not owed to us and was not asked of us. What she had was simply the expression of who she was, a person for whom the line between professional obligation and human decency had never been a meaningful line to begin with. Bankruptcy does something to your understanding of human nature that nothing else can quite replicate. It strips away, very efficiently, the social performances that surround prosperity. There were people I had considered close, business associates, a couple of men I had thought of as friends who simply became unavailable. Not cruelly, but in the specific way that people become unavailable when the professional and social utility of the relationship has been removed. What was a surprise was the other direction. My wife Sandra rebuilt her professional life quickly and carried us financially during the period when I was starting over, and she did it without resentment and without keeping score, and she never once made me feel that my failure was also my shame. It has been almost 3 years since we left that house. Sandra and I are still in Marietta, in a house that is roughly a third the size of what we had and that I have come to prefer. I am working again. 18 months ago, I started a new company. Smaller, deliberately structured. Gloria found a new family within 3 weeks. We have dinner with her and her daughter Angela 3 or 4 times a year at a restaurant in Atlanta that has become, by quiet consensus, our place. She does not let me pay for dinner when we go. We have an ongoing dispute about this that I do not expect to be resolved. Derek, who is 19 now and studying business at Georgia Tech, told me at Christmas last year that Gloria was one of the people he thought about when he thought about what it meant to be a decent person. I have been telling you a story about a housekeeper and a man who lost everything. But this is actually a story about what people reveal when the conditions that usually conceal them are removed. Prosperity is a kind of costume. It covers need. It covers vulnerability. It covers the specific quality of a person that only becomes visible when they are in a position where showing up for someone costs them something real, something they cannot spare, and they show up anyway. Gloria did not have to return that money. She did not have to bring food to a family whose house was being packed up around them. She did not have to come back on Saturdays to help or stand in a driveway with a bunch of drugstore sunflowers. She was not obligated to do any of it. What she had was simply the expression of who she was. A person for whom the line between professional obligation and human decency had never been a meaningful line to begin with. I want to leave you with something that Gloria said to me once, during one of the ordinary weekday mornings of the years when life was running well. She was in the kitchen. I was getting ready for work, and I made some offhand comment about feeling like I was on a good run. She looked at me with that expression of hers, simultaneously warm and completely clear-eyed, and she said, "The good run is not what shows you who you are. The hard one does that. If you are watching this, the people around you, not the people in your professional network, not the people you are impressive to, but the people who are present in the actual texture of your daily life. Those people are telling you something every day about who you are. Whether your decency is conditional on your circumstances, turned up when things are going well and turned down when they are not, or whether it is something more durable than that. Gloria knew that. She had known it long before I did. I just needed to lose a few things before I could see it clearly enough to understand what she had been showing me all along. Thank you for watching. If any part of this story reached something you recognize, in your own life, in the way you treat the people around you, in what you believe about loyalty and what it actually costs, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell me what hit you the hardest. Tell us where in the world you are watching from. And if you have not already, please subscribe so you do not miss the next story we bring you.